After all art is experience.
Hello and welcome to The Company Doctor. This week we're thrilled to welcome back to the show Group COO of the Ephelia Group, Fiona Richards, whose 25 years running operations for traditional banking giants like Deutsche Bank and HSBC have given her a front row seat to how the industry really works. Join us as we look past the usual corporate buzzwords and dive into the often brutal operational reality of building diverse teams in high-growth tech.
The analogy of, say, a painter.
Hello. Well, Fiona, welcome to the Company Doctor podcast. So good to have you on.
Thank you, Gary. Lovely to be here.
It's great to have you. And I've got some amazing questions for you. Plus, you've got a bit of a George Clode Grill coming up. So let's kick off. No, I'm sure you will. Or will you? Just quickly, before we get started, if you could just give the listeners a quick intro to you, Fiona, what you do, where you work, but more importantly, what makes Fiona, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I joined a company called Ephelia Group about 16 months ago, year and a half ago. Ephelia is very much focused on new technologies and new ways of solving problems across payment and financial services. We leverage traditional payment structures from an electronic EMI PSP perspective, but are also doing lots of work across blockchain technologies as well, which gives us the ability to solve problems in a modern way as best suits our client needs. I love this role. It brings together, my experience from multiple different roles and organizations, where from big banks, smaller organizations, smaller fintech scale-ups, bring all of that together into what is now, very much a modern group COO role. Knits it all together, is very much around my constant need to have something that's reasonably, deeply challenging from a sort of cerebral and a puzzle point of view. Plus, working with true entrepreneurs, people who are really, really interested in driving solutions forward. So there's nothing that's stagnant. The pace of change is incredibly fast. And every day is a conundrum. I think I know what I'm doing before I start the day every day, and it never rolls out like that. It's always entirely different, and it just keeps it fresh.
Sounds fascinating. And just quickly, in a nutshell, what's a COO? It's not a test, by the way.
Well, that's a very good question, and gets the crux of what we're talking about today. Because what a COO is varies industry to industry, company to company, and even within a company. So my role is very much looking across a sort of spectrum of both, technology, compliance, financial planning, financial controls, procurement, services, customer services, commercial priorities. I'm doing the full end-to-end in my role. Now, I find that is a very modern view on what a COO or a group COO might do. The historical view has always been, especially in financial services, that a COO would look at, back office efficiencies and controls. Now, that's not to say that isn't part of my role, but it's one of the verticals, and there are many verticals.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like an interesting job. So a couple of questions for you that, based on your intro, the thing that springs to mind is sometimes the COO is often described as the person that turns like the strategy into action, or into reality, actually. In your experience, what separates leaders who can create a vision from those who can build a culture capable of delivering it?
Yeah, the vision has to be established through a course of events. Visions that just emerge and I think all entrepreneurs would agree with this, you don't just come up with a vision overnight. It's not a eureka moment. So visions actually evolve, and during that evolution, you're hand in hand with the people who need to be able to execute and what that vision and strategy actually is. If you're not involved with that from the get-go, it becomes very, very difficult to execute something that the visionaries might have thought was the solution. It's a bit like if you boil it down into just a sort of technology delivery scenario, trying to build something when you don't actually have requirements or you haven't been part of the requirements planning becomes very, very difficult. On the execution part of it, though, so once you're embedded in that process, it then becomes, again, a very flexible approach to, you have an end point in mind, or you have an end goal or vision in mind. How do you get to that? But what you'll find is, again, just, that the execution of that and getting to that end goal will change on a daily basis. So it's the extent to which you need to be nimble. You go down one path and you realize that path either is wrong, so you need to back up a bit, but you probably don't need to back up the entire way. You go back up your path a bit, and then there's another fork or another juncture, and you go down that path instead. So it's flexibility, nimble, constantly being aware of what the different options might be, and taking that forward.
Yeah, it sounds like lots of experience coming out. You seem to have the cookbook for it, which is great. And the title of this podcast is The Evolving Role of the COO Linked to Diversity in Tech.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get inside your head a bit, Fiona. When you walk into an organization, what are the subtle signs that tell you whether diversity is generally valued or simply being managed as a corporate initiative?
I think sometimes if it's been managed as a corporate initiative, that's actually a good step forward to it being respected and valued. I still walk into places where there's no element of diversity whatsoever. You can see how, people, you don't think, if you take it away from diversity of gender or diversity of color of skin or, background, just diversity of thought, whether somebody who thinks in a completely different way, whether their views are heard or ignored, whether people are marginalized or isolated, whether everybody is coming to the table in a collaborative way, and solving problems in a way that would involve multiple people, rather than just it being a bit autocratic and one person is describing what it should be and then everybody else runs. The obviousness of people asking questions rather than just making statements. They're all just, sort of soft skills that you will see across workforces, and they vary. But it's an age-old argument as to whether some level of positive discrimination is a good thing or a bad thing. But you do see companies which are nowhere, at least if they do take some level of framework and try to apply it, it's better than not having anything at all.
Yeah, but building what you've just said, a lot of leaders say they want diverse thinking, and you were talking about this, but diverse thinking often brings a challenge or disagreement or even discomfort.
Yeah.
How can leaders create the environment where constructive tension is welcome rather than suppressed? Based on what you just said. How do you do it?
Yeah, that's education. The leaders, it's toned from the top. Leaders who are comfortable and working in organizations that challenge is accepted and encouraged. The CEO needs to do that, the COO needs to do that, the CFO needs to do it. And if any of the top exec or top leaders in the organization aren't doing that, then we need to have, and we do have, conversations around why are we closing down discussion. There might be a very valid reason for why we close down discussion. Sometimes the answer is actually just command and control if you're in a crisis. But when you're actually doing design and trying to get to the leading edge technology delivery, everybody's view has to have some level of importance.
That's fair. And just kind of changing gears a little bit, throughout your career, has there been a moment where someone with completely different background or perspective fundamentally changed the way you think about leadership?
Yes, but I see it on a granular day-to-day basis. Everybody I interact with. Now, I am a bit of an emotional petri dish. I love looking at how other people's minds work. But, absolutely every single day up and down my hierarchy. So, from my boss, from our chairman, right down to the most junior person in the organization, I find it fascinating when they think about a problem a different way. And it is actually, it's a shame because it's one of the things that we might lose through AI, because everybody ends up with the same answer when you plug it in to ChatGPT, it pushes that out usually with the same sausage factory. But even that in itself, the way that different people think about asking a question of AI underlies the differences in thoughts and how much value you then get out of the tool.
And if you look at you touched the famous AI question, but if you looked as AI and automation reshape work, because they will do, I guess, what unique human qualities do you think will become even more valuable in the future then with that in mind?
Yeah, curiosity. I don't think that is anything that's changing. I think, curiosity, people who are challenging the status quo, people who do want to either think about something deeply or, understand it, have always been people who sort of rise to the top. But the tools that you can use now to get there, so the basic questions can be answered quite quickly, and it gives a level playing field and a knowledge base. So, if you think previously 10, 15 years ago, you'd need to have understood the payments industry inside out, upside down on, how payments work, why there is an emerging market on, financial technology solutions, just understanding the different building blocks of that would have been imperative to be able to do a role in financial technology, payments. But that's actually no longer the case. Within any question that you've got, you can self-answer. But you have to have the curiosity to be able to ask the question in the first place.
I love the fact you always, whenever I ask you a question, you know the answer. There's so much experience coming out. And on the people side of that AI thing, because a lot of people worry about their jobs, but I just want to take it from the other side. Do you think the next generation entering technology is redefining success? Are they looking for something different from work than the previous generation did? Taking from the people side.
I don't actually think they are. Everybody is probably incorrect. For people who enter the workforce and are serious about entering and staying in the workforce, they want satisfaction out of what they do. And whether that is intellectual satisfaction or creative satisfaction or just being paid at the end of the day, people's definition of how they get that satisfaction varies, but that need for some level of satisfaction hasn't changed. And people identifying what their key drivers are, their key motivations, and going for that will be what wins out. Now, AI will support, as I see AI as taking away the repetitive, like computers did, 60s onwards, the repetitive skills that don't need to be done by human, but most of what we're doing still requires human in the loop at some stage. Now, AI might evolve so that that's no longer necessary, but not for the next 20, 30 years. So there's still a generation of people coming through who are looking for the same basic human conditions as generations behind.
So here's a question for you. I'm really looking forward to you answering this one. Which matters more in building a successful organization, Fiona? Is it diversity of experience, diversity of thought, or diversity of background?
Definitely diversity of thought. I used to make a joke that I was a great diversity angle throughout the 1990s and 2000s because I actually thought exactly the same way as most blokes that I knew. So they got the diversity check without any of the hassle of me, applying a more emotional lens or, a different, female-centric lens, because I don't tend to think as deeply in that kind of emotional setup as most of my very admired and capable female counterparts. But diversity of thought will win over and over again.
See what I mean? You go straight to it. I love it. You just know it's in your heart.
Wisdom of crowds.
Yeah, wisdom of crowds. And looking back over your career, Fiona, what leadership belief did you hold strongly 20 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, that you've since completely changed your mind about?
This actually goes back to your question about what do leaders of the future look like versus leaders of previous generations. I think just growing up in a reasonably formalized environment, I did law as an undergrad. I then was considering a career in the civil service. It was very formal, conservative with a small c. And my impression of leaders around that time was that is what the expectation is, somebody who is formal, who operates in a very sort of square box kind of manner. I think with the insights that we now have on different leadership types and different personality types, it's really fascinating how you see that different personalities and different styles come to the top. Steve Jobs didn't survive the 70s and 80s, but did survive the 90s. And you could argue that Steve Jobs is the reason that different leadership styles became apparent. But, it's not just about education. It's not just about social status. It's not just about how one behaves in a rigorous, sort of expectedly rigorous manner. It's around what's actually effective. How are you leading teams? How are they responding to you? How are you getting the best out of people?
Amazing. I've got time for 2 more questions. So I've got 2 killer questions for you. Are you ready for them?
Yep.
Good answer. First one is, if you could prescribe one change to the business world, a change that would make organizations healthier, more innovative, and a little bit more human, what would your prescription be?
Ooh, I don't have an answer for that one. There's too many.
Gotcha. You won't tell the last one.
I'm trying to think of my favourite one, because the obvious answer at the moment, and it actually distresses me that it's still a debate 6 years after the pandemic started. It's like, can we work from home? It's like, you can work from home sometimes. People worked from home before pandemic. You don't need to, you're not chained to your desk. You need to live your life. If the plumber's coming, you can work from home. I don't want to make it about this though. I think just, again, it goes back to just respect for people, respect for different skill sets and thought processes, bringing that together, having a true belief in, bringing the best out of people who can answer a problem differently. And that's not to say that, you could interpret that, and I will see people coming through, who struggle adding value in certain scenarios. Not everybody will add value in every scenario. What I'm saying is not to say that I believe that everybody will add value in every scenario. But if you've got sort of above the hygiene factor of somebody is capable of adding value in the scenario, then listen to what it is they're saying.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's powerful stuff. And here's the last one. It's big. You ready for it?
Yeah.
The big question. Imagine a young girl listening to this podcast today who dreams of becoming a COO one day for some reason.
That was going to be my first question. Why?
Fast forward 25 years. What do you hope has changed about leadership, technology, and opportunity by the time she reaches the boardroom?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it does need to continue to evolve. There was a video circulating on LinkedIn a few days ago. I'd seen something similar to it before, where women, and you can apply anything to the women label. It's women or minorities or anybody who looks different and thinks differently. There are still too many questions about asking people who are different to justify themselves. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I can send them a copy of the video. It's incredible. I think it was filmed in Canada, maybe, from the accents. And, it was basically putting a bunch of guys in a room and they're asking them whether or not, they have sore feet from wearing heels at work all day, whether or not, how long does it take them to put their makeup on in the morning? Just questions that men, have you ever been, you put a guy in a situation and say, have you ever been criticized for, when you're trying to be assertive, as coming across as aggressive? And, you say that to men and they look at you like, why would I ever have been asked that? But I can bet you pretty much every single woman I've ever worked for has been asked that question. We need to continue now. It is a far better place now than it was 25 years ago. That journey needs to continue.
Okay, so it's a good time to pass over to George for the George Clode Grill.
That's right. I think we've settled on the George Clode Grill as a name, haven't we, finally? Thank you, Gary. Fiona, as we said earlier, you've been through the grill before, so this should be easy, a breeze for you. I've just got 5 questions to sort of lay on you, starting with, after 25 years at traditional giants like Deutsche and HSBC, you're now COO of a cutting-edge blockchain and AI company. Did you have to completely unlearn some operational habits of old banking to build a truly diverse tech culture at Ephelia?
I got lucky. in that I hadn't been deeply rooted in operations at the big banks, the big universal banks. I'd sort of flirted around the peripheral of it, but I was largely working in the front office when I was doing COO roles. So it wasn't a case of having to unlearn the sort of very weighty structures and what the approach is like. What I do find though is that when we're recruiting and bringing people in, there is a mindset that comes with the larger organizations that somebody either needs to be able to leave at the door or be able to identify what bits are good and what bits they need to leave at the door.
Got it. Nice. Ephelia, like many companies now, leans on agentic AI and autonomous frameworks to optimize core banking. If you're automating operations, aren't you slightly at risk of shrinking that sort of exact entry-level operational role where diverse talent traditionally gets a foot in the door?
It's the very nature of structural employment or unemployment. What we're seeing is that there's absolutely still a need for entry-level talent. It's just the opportunity for that entry-level talent is far greater in that they get a far more diverse range and more skilled outcome of their first few months, years. So, AI is absolutely picking up all of the what we'd call grunt work, which frees the operators up to be able to do higher value tasks.
Right. That is incredibly clear. Thank you very much. I think we can all agree, or maybe not, but I tend to see it. The digital asset space is often heavily criticized for being a bit of a crypto bro monoculture. How hard is it operationally to recruit diverse engineers in a sector with that sort of cultural stigma, if you believe that is the case, stigma-wise?
The stigma still attaches, but I think the stigma more attaches from an external environment looking in. The guys and gals, it's very gender neutral, and it's a great thing to see that the new technologies are attracting, even on a non-binary plane, people from all backgrounds. The culture, I think, that existed when crypto assets were where it was at was very bro, as you describe it. I think as we evolve, though, into it being, it's a digital asset play, it's a digital asset environment, we focus more on how do you use blockchain technologies to be able to solve a problem rather than just looking at Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the, the big cryptos. Obviously the big cryptos exist, and that is where a lot of the technologists cut their teeth. But by no means are we sort of still seeing that it is a locked industry, and it's very difficult to get into. It's about intelligence, it's about diversity of thought, it's about flexible thinking and how you apply the technologies.
Nice. That probably explains why I haven't been able to break into the industry. Okay, I had 5. You've actually managed to answer 2 in 1. So I'm going to just finish with a final question for you. The modern top tier of finance is, I think, still fairly, mostly regarded as a bit of a uniform club. As COO, how do you stop your next generation of leaders from just copying the exact same mold from those previous leaders?
It's fascinating because I don't think anybody's got any interest in doing that. If you think sort of go back to, the 1980s or the 90s, and the kids coming through then had no impression of trying to emulate, the leadership from the 50s and 60s and 70s. And I think we just see that evolving. And I personally love it because it keeps you on your toes. I think at dinner that Gary and Neil posted, this conversation came up in that, we each as a generation think we're right, but we're not. The world is there for the generations behind us, and watching what those generations need and want and feel that their future is going to be, and trying to come up with a ground which is delivery focused through multiple different experiences is actually, it's enlivening every day.
Fantastic. Well, that's very encouraging to hear. And you've flown through your second George Clode Grill, so congratulations. Thank you very much. Gary, back over to you.
Yeah, that's amazing. And by the way, so insightful and inspirational, actually, in some of your answers. I love the fact that pretty much every question I ask you, it's in your heart. You know the answer, or in your head.
I think about this stuff a lot.
You do, but you're really concise, and I think this is really helpful, and a lot of people really get a lot out of it. So thanks, Fiona. Thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Gary. Speak soon.
Bye.
Bye.
That's it for this week's episode. A massive thank you once again to Fiona for sharing her operational wisdom, and of course to Gary for keeping us all on track. Now, before you go, we've got an exciting announcement from Fiona's team. Kedo Compliance is coming soon. Yes, indeed, as part of the Ephelia ecosystem. Kedo is an AI-first compliance platform designed to completely remove the headache from financial crime protection. It uses specialized AI agents to handle everything from KYC and AML to transaction monitoring across traditional banking and blockchain. And it runs in any jurisdiction and cuts verification spend by up to 60%. So do keep your eyes peeled for Kedo Compliance coming at you very soon. And in the meantime, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.